Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships in our Saturday edition video where we do an upgrade and commander build of different ships in the game. Today we're going to be looking at the Japanese Tier 6 battleship, the Fuso, on the tech tree. So we're going to be looking at modules, consumables, upgrades, and the commander, and I'll have timestamps in the bottom. So if you just want to fast forward and click through different aspects and what you're seeking to know more about this ship, feel free to do so. So first we want to start off with an overview of the Fuso. I'm talking about what kind of battleship is she. You have different types of battleships in the game. You have the brawling, close quarters, combat battleships. You have then the more mid-range battleships. And then you have those long-range sniper-like battleships. To me, Fuso plays, I'd say, mid to long range. She kind of is in both of that. And I say mid-range just because of her sigma value being 1.5. When I'm talking about the sigma value, I'm talking about the accuracy of the guns. 1.5 is not good. It's rather on the poor side. And I think she has good dispersion, but when you're talking about sigma and then dispersion value, but sigma value, it's quite poor at 1.5. But in the case of Fuso, she has these 12, 14-inch guns. So if you throw enough crap at the wall, some of it's going to stick. And I find that that best works at the mid-range. So let's say 10 to 14 kilometer range, something like that. So she does quite well in that regard. Talking about the armor layout real quick. You have the fore-end plating, 26 millimeter, and then you have more of a, I don't know if you can necessarily call this an icebreaker, but this thicker armor belt here towards the bottom, 102 millimeter. Then you have the side plating, 26 millimeter, and then the rear plating, also 26. But the difference with the rear, it's a little more vulnerable than the front because you don't have this same length of the fore-end armor belt going all the way to the front, where it doesn't quite make it all the way to the rear of the ship on the stern. So that's something you gotta be mindful of. The deck plating, 35 millimeter is a bit more resistant to HE spam. That will help you out. In terms of dive bombers, you know, Lord help you if you face dive bombers at Tier 8, the German aircraft carriers. I'm particularly thinking of being able to maybe punch through this, or not maybe, will punch through this and reach your citadel. So if we take everything away, you can see your citadel is a little above waterline, and just barely. You have this armored deck slope, 76 millimeter, and then of course sticking out the most. So if you're going up against the Fuso, basically if you're trying to hit the citadel, you want to be aiming between these two conning towers. That is where you're going to be able to punch through. So but you have to be mindful of that rear weakness if you're kiting away, just because some players, if they know the weakness there, they can expose it quite well. So let's go ahead and go look at the equipment. Modules. So your main battery, there's no upgrade there. What you see is what you get. 28-second reload time, 180-degree turn time, 56.3 seconds. That is quite atrocious, and we're going to be talking more about that when we look at some of the upgrades here, as well as the commander skills. You have the Fuso A hull, which takes you from 44,900 HP to 57,100 HP once you get the hull B. You can also see the AA defense goes up and maneuverability goes up. The AA defense is, it's okay at Tier 6. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it does all right. Against Tier 8, though, you will be definitely struggling. Then for the gunfire control system, you can upgrade there. That boosts your main battery firing range from 19.8 to 21.8. So Fuso at Tier 6 has the longest range of any Tier 6 battleship or just ship in general in the game. So that's at Tier 6. That's crazy. I mean, that's more than Massachusetts, right? And several other ships, Georgia, you know, even at Tier 9. So quite crazy. Then you look at the propulsion, you go from 57,900 horsepower to a whopping 70,000 horsepower. So it takes you up to 24.5 knots instead of that standard 21.6. So this is what Fuso does better in regards to, like, for example, the American battleships that go super slow at tier 6. Like, just as a quick example, if I can get to New York's propulsion, 21, and that's with the upgrade. Otherwise, it's 18.5. It's even better than the West Virginia, the tier 6. So you have better speed, so you can outrun the American battleships, kiting away. You are the one who dictates the distance between a lot of the different tier 6 battleships in the game in terms of speed, except Repulse. Repulse is the fastest tier 6 battleship that I know of in the game right now. Let's see here. So let's talk about the upgrades. So for first slot, you have the main armaments modification 1, which I have upgraded. The main thing here is that it increases the survivability and accelerates repairs of the main battery, since you don't have torpedo tubes on the Fuso. So your risk of your main battery becoming incapacitated is reduced by -20%. Your main battery survivability goes up by +50%, and your main battery repair time goes down by -20%. Then you have auxiliary armaments modification 1. This is for your secondaries and AA, but really Fuso is not that type of ship, so I don't recommend this. And then you have magazine modification 1, which reduces the risk of your ship's magazine detonating by -70%. But when you go to combat signals, you want to take the Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating if you're playing in random battles, ranked, brawl, clan battles, anything like that. You want to be taking it. I won't run the Juliet Charlie combat signal on the Fuso in co-op, since the risk, you're pretty much going to win in co-op most of the time. You also have these two others, spotting aircraft modification 1 and the damage control party modification 1. Your range is already so excessively long that you don't need this upgrade. And then this would take your damage control party action time from 10 seconds to 14 seconds. So I don't see a big benefit of that. So I really feel like the main battery is where you want to invest in on the Fuso, because you have so many guns and you want to keep those in fighting action. For the second upgrade, you have two options. You have the damage control system modification 1, which reduces the risk of fire and flooding. Risk of catching fire, -5%. Risk of flooding, -3%. So you're improving your survivability, taking this a little bit right there. So recommend that one. Engine room protection. This is something you see more on destroyers, maybe even some cruisers, where it reduces the risk of incapacitation and accelerates repairs of the engine and steering gears. So I don't really need that on Fuso. It's really the damage control system modification 1. For the slot 3, you have a couple options here. You have first the main battery modification 2, which increases the traverse speed of the main turrets by +15%. So right now we can see our 180-degree turn time is 56.3 seconds, which is really bad. A lot of the tier 6 battleships don't have the best 180-degree turn time in comparison to higher tiered battleships, but this is actually quite poor. So you could take this, which would improve your main battery traverse speed. We'll talk about, let's see, +15%. I'll do the math real quick. So we were at 56.3, which means you'd be shaving almost 8.5 seconds off. So 56 minus, let's say, 0.5. You'd be getting under 50 seconds, so roughly 47 seconds is what you're looking at with that modification. But we're going to be taking turret traverse or grease the gears on our commander, so we'll look at that in a moment. You have secondary battery. Again, Fuso's not so much about the secondary battery life. She gets these 127 and 152 millimeter turrets that go to a maximum range of 5.5 unless we throw a combat signal to boost that range a tiny bit. But really, again, doesn't have the best secondaries in the world and doesn't have the best AA in the world, so I don't really see any sense of investing in there. And here, AA for said reason I already gave. Then you have aiming systems modification 1. The main reason of why I take this is for the maximum main battery shell dispersion. It reduces your shell dispersion, so it means tighter groups since that sigma value is already rather poor. And you do get a slight buff to your secondaries, the firing range and the shell dispersion of the secondary battery. But really, having a tighter dispersion, I really favor. So it means that with my main battery salvos, I feel like could be more accurate in getting some devastating strikes in with Fuso with those 12, 14-inch guns. So if you're more that type, I would recommend the Aiming Systems Modification 1. If the turret traverse is driving you really bad, then you could go for the main battery modification 2. The reason why I favor this more is 1, it's that shell dispersion. You're reducing it so you're having tighter groups. And 2, if you're paying attention to your positioning with how your guns are set up, it shouldn't bother you so much. Where you shouldn't be constantly changing sides. You should be positioned well where this isn't as big of a deal. For slot 4, I recommend the Damage Control System Modification 2. Accelerates fire extinguishing and recovery from flooding. Fire extinguishing time -15%, and the same for your flooding recovery time. So if you do get a fire on board or a flood, it is going to be put out more quickly if you're not going to use your damage control party, or let's say your damage control party is on cooldown. You also get propulsion modification, steering gears modification, airstrike modification. I don't really see the value in these. When we look at the maneuverability, your rudder shift time is 14.9 seconds, and your turning circle radius is 740 meters, which to me is not so bad at tier 6. So again, it's investing in your survivability and tankiness to a certain extent is why I like the Damage Control System Modification 2 and that Damage Control System Modification 1. In terms of consumables, you have your damage control party, standard, consumable action time of 10 seconds, reload time of 76 seconds, quite typical. It's usually 80 seconds for the reload time on most battleships. So this is nothing new. So standard there. The repair party partially restores the ship's HP by repairing any light damage. I need to see if I have a combat signal mounted, which I do. This combat signal, the India Delta, is that the damage can be repaired at sea. The amount of HP recovered when the repair party consumables used is plus 20%. And the amount of HP that can be stored with the help of squadrons repair consumable plus 5. So if you're like aircraft carrier or a hybrid ship or something, you have that. But mostly it's because you're able to recover more health, which is why the India Delta combat signal is so good. So I recommend taking that on that, and that helps us get to that 342. If I were to demount it, you see it drops down to 285. So then you have spotting aircraft. That sometimes you get to choose between spotting aircraft fighter. That is not the case on the Fuso. You just get spotting. So when you go plus 20% on top of that range of 21.8, I mean, when you're playing the tier 6 maps, and then maybe if you unfortunately get bottom tiered tier 8, I mean, you can reach out really far with Fuso. But really getting out to that 21.8 and further, your Sigma is really going to start affecting you with your accuracy of those shells. So let's go ahead and move into the commander. Now, in the video I showed yesterday, I had Yamamoto Isuroku. He is now on my Nagato. However you pronounce that ship. I haven't checked that yet. So I've moved one that I had in reserves to the Fuso. I used one of my 10-point commanders. So we're going to talk about that. And there are honestly probably few ways you could go for your first point. There's 3 in particular that come to my mind. 2 that I'd probably advise more. So you could go for the typical gun feeder. Time taken to switch between shell type is reduced by -50%. So your reload time on your main battery is 28 seconds. So that means you cut that in half. You're down to 14 seconds. So let's say you want to switch between doing an armor piercing salvo to a high explosive salvo, or vice versa. You just switch to shell type, and instead of having that standard 28-second reload time, because that's what, if you switch between AP and HE without this skill, it's going to take you 28 seconds. So at that point, you're just better off firing and then switching the shell type. You could also run the emergency repair specialist. I had to like check myself because this is actually what I had on Fuso. This is what I have on Yamamoto Isuroku in yesterday's video. The reload time of the damage control party is reduced by -3%, and the repair party consumable reload time is reduced by -3%, which means your DCP, your repair party are coming back online sooner. So I kind of did that with the overall build that I'm going for on the Yamato, the tier 10 tech tree Japanese battleship. So I had this mounted. You could also go with preventative maintenance. Reduces the risk of the main turrets, torpedo tubes, steering gears, and engine from becoming incapacitated. So not only does this work for main battery, you're also getting a little perk out of the steering gears and engine. When I was playing Fuso, the battles I played, I don't think I ever had a turret knocked out, and I don't think I ever had the engine incapacitated. Maybe the steering gears if I took a torpedo on the rear or something. But to me, I didn't see this as a big thing. So if I was going to be running a commander solely for Fuso, I might actually lean towards the gun feeder. But alternatively, you could go for the emergency repair specialist. But I only had that on the Yamamoto Isuroku because I'm building him up for the tier 10 Yamato battleship. And then you definitely, for a 3rd-point commander, you want to take the main battery traverse speed. So you can see we just went up on artillery, where now our main battery is 46.9 seconds. So that is much more bearable than without it, which again is that 56.3 seconds, so almost a minute. So this gets you down to 46.9 seconds, which is much better. So you really want to grease the gears on Fuso. Highly recommended. Then I would go for something like Adrenaline Rush. Enhances the ship parameters for each 1% of HP lost. So your main battery reload time is going to be reduced. Your airstrike armament reload time is going to be reduced. Your secondary battery reload time is going to be reduced. But you get a small buff on your continuous AA damage by plus 0.2%. But likely the HEs that you've been taking has probably knocked out some of your AA, so maybe think of it as being on par, or you don't have quite as much once you begin taking damage. And then for a 10-point commander, this is where things get interesting because you have these 3 kind of really good options. When we look at the concealment of Fuso without a temporary or permanent camouflage, our detectability range by sea is 18.9 kilometers, so that is really bad in comparison to a lot of the other tier 6 battleships. So yeah, even if you take, let's go ahead and just throw a temporary camouflage on, just to show you. We'll just run that one. We'll go back into the commander, so we're now down to 18.3. And then if you took concealment, you're only down to 16.5. Now, again, I did have this in yesterday's battle. Because again, taking Yamamoto Isuroku on the Yamato. But this is something I would still run at tier 6 with Fuso, in case you're trying to get away and go dark. I mean, you have the range, the gun range should be able to make up the difference there. But as a 10-point, I would probably recommend you going for Fire Prevention Expert first. Because, again, like I was saying, I feel the Fuso really plays best at mid to long range. So think of it as 10 kilometers and higher. So you're improving, again, your survivability, how long you're going to be able to impact the game by taking Fire Prevention Expert, because it stacks well with the damage control modifications. So the risk of catching fire is reduced by -10%, and the maximum number of fires is -1. So on your ship, you can get 4 fires without taking Fire Prevention Expert. And those places of those 4 fires is on the bow, on the stern, and 2 on the superstructure conning tower area. So what Fire Prevention does is it takes the 2 fires that would happen in the superstructure and combines it to 1. So you only have 1 fire on the superstructure, 1 on the stern, and 1 on the bow. So a lot of HE, DDs, cruisers that are really good at the HE meta at tier 6, often they're focusing on your superstructure. So Not many destroyer players like, oh, I have the fire lit on the superstructure. Now let me start HE spamming the bow or the stern. Most of them are just going to keep spamming the superstructure. So that is where Fire Prevention Expert comes in, because again, you're improving your survivability and how long you're going to be able to last and make an impact in the game. So as a 10-pointer, I would run Fire Prevention Expert first. For a 14-point build, I think there's two ways you could go. You could go for Concealment Expert first, getting you down to that 16.5 kilometer detection range by sea, 8.8 kilometer by air. Or you could go for Emergency Repair Expert if you find that your concealment is not a big deal. I mean, just know that pretty much as soon as the battle starts, you're almost detected to a certain extent. For me, if I was going up the points in my commander, I'm probably also going to take Concealment Expert as my 14-point build. After that, then I'm going to go for the Emergency Repair Expert. What this does is that the action time of damage control party consumable is extended by plus 10%. So you saw that the action time of the damage control party is 10 seconds, is 10%. Now it goes to 11 seconds. So your DCP runs an extra second longer, which sometimes maybe you need. You have an unlimited amount of DCPs on the Fuso. There's certain battleships in the game that have a fast damage control party. You don't get that on the Fuso, so the +1 doesn't really mean anything there. The repair party consumable action time is also improved by plus 10%, so meaning you have the potential to heal back even more damage that you've taken. And instead of having 4 repair parties, you get 5 repair party charges. So to me, that's really good. And then that brings us to, let's see, that's an 18-point build. So it means we have 3 points left. I would go for basics of survivability. Your module restoration time, if a module gets knocked out, is reduced by -15%. Your fire extinguishing time and your flooding recovery time go down by -15%. So again, you're improving your survivability, improving how long you're going to survive in the game to be able to make more of an impact on the game as it progresses. So this is what I would recommend. Pretty straightforward. I think at the low tier, there is, or sorry, mid tier. It's a little bit more straightforward. I mean, when you get to the higher tier battleships, sometimes there's a little more gimmicks added in there. There's a little bit more possibilities. But for me, this is a very standard build on a mid-tier battleship. Again, if you want to, you could go for something like this. If you would rather take the emergency repair specialist, if it doesn't really bother you to give up the time taken to switch between shell type. When you get these 14-inch guns, the fire starting chance on them is 25%, which is not bad. It's all right. So if it doesn't bother you to not have the time taken to switch between shell type, to have that reduced by 50%, you can just take this, which is the build I had yesterday was, I think it was this on the Fuso. Or yeah, in yesterday's video. This is what I was running. So you could do something like that, or you could run the preventative maintenance, but again, I don't feel like it's that big of a deal. I haven't had any bad experience of my main turrets being knocked out or losing steering gears or engine from becoming incapacitated. Who knows, maybe I play a little more Fuso and bad things start happening. So I would recommend this build. I would recommend, oh, I clicked wrong. This build. These are really going to be my two choices, and you can see there's little variation except when it comes to the emergency repair specialist. Another thing you could do is if the basics of survivability isn't your thing, and you really need priority target. Priority target is always such a solid skill. It helps know if there are enemy ships targeting you, so that gives you a little bit more awareness. So you could run this then as an example, but you're just giving up basics of survivability. I could see this being a third option to run, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, the reason why I don't take priority target, priority target used to be a 1-point skill, so I would constantly take it because it's just really invaluable. But then with the Commander rework of 10.0, they made priority target a 2-point skill. And what I do with not taking priority target is I'm looking around at battleships and cruisers that are in my area, and I'm seeing who is targeting me. I'm being conscious of how much broadside I'm showing to an enemy ship. You know, ideally you don't want to be showing broadside, so angling. So I'm like, oh, I want to turn out and I want to go to starboard, to your right, and then I'm checking like, oh, that battleship's targeting me right now. His guns are looking my way. So I shouldn't make the turn, wait for him to shoot, and then I can make that turn. So that's why I don't have priority target on, because I'm just trying to get more used to being observant. So I can invest some of my commander skill points into other things. So why not some of the other skills? Demolition expert. I mean, this is really something maybe more you'd see on a cruiser. I don't really see the need for it on the Fuso at tier 6. Consumable specialist, the only buff you get is the spotter plane, and you already have super long range to begin with, so this is pointless because you're only getting 1 out of 5 things here, and you already have good range at tier 6. Incoming fire alert, a warning about a salvo fired at your ship from a distance more than 4.5 kilometers. This isn't a bad skill. Let's think here. If you really wanted incoming fire alert, as an example, there's no sense taking priority target. Either you take priority target or you take incoming fire alert if you're wanting to have that awareness. Then all of a sudden your build might turn into something like this. It's not bad, but usually you're just trying to be aware of seeing if there's any incoming salvos across the map on you. And we talk about preventive maintenance, IFHE. This does nothing for you with the Fuso at tier 6. All it does is it takes away, reduces your chance of causing a fire by half without any modifiers applied. So you don't cross any important thresholds with the 14-inch guns to make meaningful damage to take that. And you really want the fire chance, I think, with Fuso, with that IG and HE. Brisk, no. Brisk is when it increases your ship's speed while she remains undetected. Okay, see that number? No, you don't take that. Brisk, you only see on fast paced battleships, and maybe something more that battleships have engine boost. So for example, at tier 6, I'm looking at U repulse. Brisk on repulse. I'm doing that right now, and I'll have a commander build on that ship before too long. Vigilance, no. It just extends the torpedo acquisition range even while the hydroacoustic search consumable is active. So you just pick up torpedoes farther away, but it also reduces the amount of damage you take from torpedoes. Now just be aware, and that's again having a destroyer between you and enemy team or a cruiser to kind of be screening for you is really important with Fuso. A defense and ASW expert. No, I don't really think that's where you should be investing in. I would focus on your main battery, and then your survivability tankiness, and so that doesn't make the cut for me. Super heavy AP shells. This is a terrible skill. Don't take it. Don't take it. Your main battery AP shell damage gets improved by plus 7.5%, but your fire extinguishing time and flooding recovery time are increased by a plus 25%. So it means you're going to be burning longer, you're going to be flooding longer, so you don't want to take this skill. It's not worth the trade. And you're not a secondary battleship, you're not a close quarters battleship, so that immediately eliminates these 3 skills here, and probably I would say 4 skills. So don't take these skills on Fuso. Talked about basic survivability, improved repair party readiness, improves the efficiency of consumables each time your ship receives potential damage equal to 100% of the ship's base HP. No. It's I have a hard time with skills that can be activated, and this one isn't a good skill really to begin with, because it requires something to occur for you to get any use of the skill, and that's 3 points. You can make that argument with Adrenaline Rush, but if you're fighting, your health is definitely going to go down, and you're turning that 28-second reload to 26-second, 25-second reload as your health goes down. So that's the benefit of Adrenaline Rush. Focus fire training, again, your A is not the best. There's other tier 6 battleships that do that role better, so you're not making an AA fighter out of Fuso. Furious can be activated, improves your ship's characteristics for each active fire on board your ship. Basically, this is a meme build. That means you don't want fire prevention, because the more fires on your ship, the quicker your main battle reload time and the increased dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking your ship, meaning they have worse dispersion. You don't want to do this in Fuso, so definitely a bad thing. You're not a secondary quarter battleship, you're not a close quarter battleship, so we give up these. And that brings us to have covering all the skills. So this would probably be first what I'm looking at, and then this would be a second recommendation. And if it doesn't bother you to not have basic survivability and you really want priority target, this is the way I would see you make priority target work. So yeah, so that's going to bring us to a close. So we just did that in just over 31 minutes. So I'm trying to be conscious of the time and going through and talking about these different ships in the game. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you did not, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you are subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. If you didn't catch the battle I had in Fuso yesterday, then there should be a little video card for you to click on the left of the screen to check that battle out with having Yamamoto Isuroku as your commander of the Fuso. So until next time, take care.